Coming up on No Pulp, two things that don't go well together, and you might be surprised, college football in the top 10?
We're midway through the season, some mid-majors making some big-time noise.
Big-time noise. How about goalposts falling? Who needs a goalpost? It's No Pulp, and it starts right now.
Sonny DeShero from Auburn. The freshman never won. The freshman never won championships.
Chairman, you are an absolute sweat.
Cleveland the catch. Good if it does.
Wow, it's getting serious.
Frankly, I'm pretty embarrassed.
Bang!
No Pulp time in our CitrusTV studio. He's Nick Zelaya. I'm Cameron Ezeir. We're breaking everything down in the weekend of college football. That it was a weekend full of surprises, a lot of shockers. And if we're going to start with anything, Nick, is there a game that you want to mention?
I mean, the Tennessee-Alabama game
was
pretty good.
That was
a decent game of the week.
Not just one of the best games of the week, and maybe the best game of the year. And this is a really early candidate halfway through the season. Tennessee, the 6th-ranked team in the country, takes down number 3 Alabama. They hand the Crimson Tide their first loss of the season, and this was a barn burner to say the least. 52-49, and it says a lot about both teams because now Tennessee is undefeated and they jump into the top 4. Alabama, they've been crumbling as of late, even though they only have one loss. Is it more about what's wrong with Alabama or what's good with Tennessee?
Well, first off, I think it's Tennessee. They're just a really good team. But I do have to mention, you know it's a good game when LeBron is live tweeting the game. He's been getting into the live tweeting business lately. It's pretty good.
And neither team's from Ohio.
It's amazing. But I mean, I want to give a big shout out to Jalen Hyatt. He had a combined 4 touchdowns through his first 2 seasons at Tennessee. 5 touchdowns on 6 catches. 207 yards. That's 56.7 fantasy points if you're playing college football fantasy out there. But this Tennessee team, what makes them so good, I think, is how fast-paced their offense is and how they come out of the gates ready to roll. You know, 3 touchdowns in the first quarter for this Tennessee team, and they took advantage of some Alabama miscues. 17 penalties, a season high for 135 yards for the Roll Tide. They still only lost by 3 points, but this Tennessee team, I mean, they need to feel really good now that they beat Alabama. They got to play Georgia in a couple weeks, but after that, they're smooth sailing. College football playoffs could be looking pretty good in Tennessee.
Hey, it could. You know, I'm a history buff, so I'm going to throw out a couple historical facts for you. So Tennessee, first time they've beaten Alabama in 16 years. How about the 52 points that Alabama gave up to Tennessee, the most they've given up since 1907. I don't think you could remember 1907. Yeah, this Tennessee team is dynamic on the offensive side. The second best offense in the nation, scoring about 48 points per game. Jalen Hyatt, he's phenomenal. How about Hendon Hooker? He's emerged as maybe a Heisman candidate. And you look on the other side and you say, well, Alabama, should you be concerned? I'm not really that concerned. Last year, they struggled. 3 out of the last 4 games, they only won by a touchdown, and they made it all the way to the national championship. So I'm not too concerned about Alabama, but roll Vols.
I don't know if Bryce Young was 100% either in this game. He was coming off that injury. And, I mean, if you're Bryce Young, you can't really say no to playing in that type of atmosphere. But talk about an atmosphere. Tennessee, whoa. One of a few teams this past week to storm the field after a big upset victory. They just didn't storm the field. They took the goalpost. They ran it up the bleachers. They threw it in the water. Madness was happening in Tennessee. And you look at there, all of those teams that won stormed the field. And it was just, if you're one of those teams, Cam, yes, you stormed the field, but if you're a fan of those teams, which impresses you most?
I would say, I mean, out of all of those, it'd have to be Utah because USC was primed for a spot in the college football playoff. And if you know anything about non-Power 5 teams, and I know the Pac-12's in the Power 5, but I'd like to say, well, they don't really get enough respect from the committee because of, you know, they don't really have a great strength of schedule. So all these teams or all these fan bases rush the field, and I would say the one that was warranted the most was Utah. The other ones, I'm not too happy with Syracuse rushing the field.
No, I'm not. That's fair, though.
I'm not. I like Tennessee rushing the field because first time beating Alabama in 16 years. Utah, they needed to win that game to keep up any hope in the Pac-12. But let's be honest, you beat a top 5 team, you can rush the field. You're not ranked, the other team is, you can rush the field. All those other times, come on, it's not special anymore.
You know, I'm okay with the TCU one because you're now undefeated. It was a battle of unbeatens in the Big 12. You're now a top 10 team. I'm going to get into TCU later on. This team had a big turnaround this season after a losing year last year. They're now 6-0. For TCU, I'm pumped to see how this team does. They play Kansas State this week. That's another top 20 opponent. If they can win that, I feel really good. One of these SEC teams has to fall eventually, and that will put TCU in a really good position for college football playoffs. But speaking of the storming, I mean, it's cool and all, but like, it can be dangerous.
Right.
The players can get hurt, and God forbid if that happens.
When can it be special? I mean, let's jump to Michigan and Penn State. This was a top 10 matchup, and I understand that Michigan was favored and they blew out the Nittany Lions 41-17 after Penn State was up 17-16. So Michigan scores 25 unanswered. But I'd be pissed if it was Michigan that was storming the field. I just think it's not fun anymore if everyone just storms the field based off a win. But ultimately, when you look at this Michigan game against Penn State, you ultimately have to say, does Michigan have a path to the college football playoff?
You know, I think they do, just because they're the Michigan Wolverines. They made it last year, obviously. They have that name recognition to make the college football playoffs. But really, they haven't played anyone. They haven't played anyone good. But the thing with me is that despite beating up on Penn State, they've been beating up on these poor teams, which they have to do if they want to make a solid resume for the college football playoffs. But I mean, they scored 25 unanswered in the third quarter against Penn State. The running game was top tier. Both Donovan Edwards and Blake Corum both had over 170 rushing yards. And also, this defense was fantastic. Penn State had a whopping 9 yards going into the second quarter.
Unbelievable.
Michigan's defense, they've held teams to less than 5 points multiple times throughout the season. They've shut out a couple of opponents. This Michigan team is legit, despite the fact that the first 6 games were against opponents.
Right, but Nick, what I learned about Michigan is in those first couple of games, what did you want to decide? Was it Cade McNamara? Was it J.J. McCarthy? You really didn't learn. You go with McCarthy, but Michigan ranks 9th in the Big Ten in pass yards per game, where they make their money, first in the Big Ten and top 25 in the nation in rush yards per game. And it's a guy in Blake Corum that last year in 12 games, over 950 yards. 7 games in, 901 yards. What you've learned about Michigan, if they can beat Ohio State, you do it on the ground. Now the issue is, in your final 5 games, you're playing 3 of the top 5 rush defenses in all of the Big Ten. So you just wonder, hey, can Michigan keep it up? And I don't think so, especially with Ohio State looming.
It's so hard for me to rate Michigan until they play Ohio State. But I mean, those 6 prep games, it feels like, up until the big matchups happen, is huge, because Oregon looks really good now after they got beat up against Georgia. You throw Georgia and Oregon against each other week 7, you don't know what happens.
I mean, it's really interesting. I think the whole entire college football landscape has been interesting so far. And Nick, he'll be joined by Ian Nicholas after the break. We're throwing Nick in the juicer. We'll see if he can take down the newbie, or if Ian can find a way to knock off Nick.
Visit aarp.org/caregiving for information on how to provide even better care for the person who wants to care of you.
When I was in foster care, I never knew when I would have to move. So I always had my suitcase ready to go. Then one day, I was adopted. My new parents opened their hearts and home to me. My parents cook my favorite breakfast for me every morning. My parents take me on trips I never thought I would go on. They gave me a home and an even better reason to use that suitcase. My parents aren't perfect, but they're perfect for me. Jason, let's go see your room.
That's not right. How is it? Is it good?
Back on No Pulp, and welcome into the juicer. I think I need a gavel. I think we're in the courtroom, and the session about to be adjourned. That's Ian Nicholas. That's Nick Zelaya. I'm Cameron Ezeir. And prior to the break, I said Ian Nicholas was the newbie, but this is your second time on. Nick, this is your first time as a host in the juicer, so maybe you're the newbie. Well, either way, we'll see who takes it in the juicer. We got 4 topics to talk about, so let's get right into it. We're talking about teams that, well, they have some pretty good schedules coming up, and it's 2 teams that, oh, well, they're ranked. I mean, it may be shocked that they are ranked, but Nick, which ranked team has the toughest schedule moving forward?
For me, it's the number 17 Kansas State Wildcats, and they've only played 1 ranked opponent so far this year. So them being ranked, I'm still a bit on the table about, but I mean, you take a look at that there. Coming up against TCU, the number 8 team, I just praised them in the previous segment. You know, this is a really good Big 12 team. And then they got number 11 Oklahoma State, who just lost to TCU by a point. Number 20 Texas, and then Baylor, and then you finish off the year against Kansas, who I know isn't ranked anymore. They might lose every game for the rest of the season because that's how it works if you're a Kansas Jayhawk fan. But for this Kansas State team, it's going to be a really tough battle for the final 6 weeks of the season.
That's a heck of an argument you're making. You're saying Kansas may lose every single game. That's a really tough one. I'm going to go Kentucky because you know what's better than the 8th best team in the country?
Go ahead.
The 3rd best team in the country, Tennessee. That's who Kentucky's going to be playing after their bye week. They're going to need that bye week because after playing Tennessee, who came off the best win of a college football season, period, they're going to play Missouri. Okay, I understand. Not a big challenge. Then you got Georgia. Best team in the country, and they've been playing like it ever since that so-so Sam against Missouri. That's 2 automatic losses right there. Will Levis and Chris Rodriguez, they can go superhuman, and Kentucky still is going to have at least 4 losses to end their year.
Now, what I learned about Kentucky is one thing and one thing only. They're very inconsistent. They're going up against great teams, but when you take into account the rest of the schedule, I'm going Kansas State. More ranked teams that they have to face, and they go on the road against a couple teams that could prove to be underdogs, but could upset them. So give the point to Nick on that one.
I will say to interrupt real quick, Will Levis, he's from Connecticut. So we've got there. So
Oh,
shout out Will Levis. Shout out Will Levis.
Well, let's just move on before we talk more about Connecticut. Let's talk more about defenses. Best defense in the country.
Defenses win championships. That's why Ryan Day got his new defensive coordinator, and that's why his defense is the 3rd best in the nation and the best rush defense in the entirety of the nation. You guys were talking about it. When Ohio State plays Michigan, how are they going to be able to stop them? They're going to be able to stop them with the best front 7 in the land, Jim Knowles. You get him from Oklahoma State to run the show defensively. You give him $2 million a year to call those defensive plays, and his unit is not only top 10 against the run, but also top 10 against the pass, which is pretty impressive considering, Ohio State blows everybody out.
I mean, Ian, you talk about defense wins championships. That's how Georgia won a championship last year. And they still got the best defense in the country. I know they lost like 10,000 players to the NFL draft last year. They only got one guy now, Jalen Carter. He'll probably be like a top 10 pick. But look at this Georgia defense. They didn't have much experience coming in, but they have been so good. Giving up 9 points per game, which is 2nd in the country. They allow the 3rd least amount of yards in the country. And they also have the 8th fewest penalties on the season. And, they only gave up 3 points to an Oregon team that now is 10th in the nation. They look like a really good Ducks team, and it looks like a really strong win now for this Georgia team, especially the defense.
Yeah, but they played Oregon in the first game of the year, and guess what? Georgia hasn't played anyone since. And for Ohio State, they're in a conference that's known for their hard-nosed defense, and they're the best in the land, like you mentioned. Give me Ohio. No, I'm not going with Connecticut on that one. But you might be screaming Ohio on this next pick because I think he's the front runner to win the Heisman. But then again, I'm not the one that is naming the front runner to win the Heisman. Nick, who do you got?
CJ Stroud. I mean, I feel like there's only one answer here. It's CJ Stroud.
Nope.
The Ohio State quarterback. Yes.
Why?
You talk about how good the Ohio State defense is. Well, they got to score points to win games, and that is the reason they score points. CJ Stroud, 24 touchdowns. This guy missed a game this year, and he's 1st in the nation in touchdowns. Only 1,700 yards, which, isn't terrible, but, he gets guys involved. Even without Jackson Smith and Jigba, who got injured that first game against Notre Dame in the season, he's been able to get other wideouts involved. 5 different receivers on the Buckeyes have at least 100 yards catching. CJ Stroud, the team player.
CJ Stroud, more like system quarterback Stroud. There's a reason why a Buckeyes quarterback hasn't won the Heisman since 2006. It's because they're really just system quarterbacks. You know who isn't? Hendon Hooker. Beating Alabama, there's no system to beating Bama. You just need to be really good at football. And that's what Hendon Hooker was this weekend. Over 400 total yards and 5 touchdowns. I mean, that was theft. That was Grand Theft Auto style on that final drive. He was getting away with that Heisman Award. Bryce Young, he thinks, oh, I'm going to get this award the second year in a row. No, Hendon Hooker comes out of nowhere from Virginia Tech, where he was a nobody, and he brings Tennessee back to prominence. This is the best they've been in the 21st century. How do you not give it to this guy?
When was the last time a Tennessee quarterback won the Heisman?
I don't know, but he deserves it.
It's a Peyton Manning. Everything revolves around Peyton Manning in Tennessee.
There's your Bronco fan over there. Give me C.J. Stroud, because better completion percentage. Not just that for Nick. 27 points. Or actually, I'm doing my math completely wrong. It's 63 points because he has 9 more touchdowns than Hendon Hooker. You got to score. You got to get to pay dirt. We're going to wrap things up on the juicer. This is worth 2 points. So, Ian, if you win it, you win the juicer. You take down Nick, who is the newbie in this situation. From one Connecticut native to another, we're starting with maybe the winner on this one. Who is the best story in college football?
The team that just continues to win, even though they shouldn't. They only won 2 games last year, but Tulane has already tripled their win total this year, and they're ranked for the first time since, you guessed it, another 1998 reference. The Wave are unbelievable. They gave up 34 points a game last year, only 16 this year. Could you believe that Tulane is the best team in Louisiana, and they didn't even need to fake a southern accent to get there? Brian Kelly, what are you doing? Tulane owns the state, and they're owning the AAC.
I didn't know you were such a big Tulane guy.
That was good. I will
awesome.
say, I'm impressed.
I'll go with TCU here, the Horned Frogs. And this team, they're coming off a 5-7 year in 2021. This year they're 6-0, the only undefeated team right now in the Big 12. And they haven't played a bowl game since 2018. They got unlucky in 2020. They became eligible, but COVID stopped that, so they couldn't play in a bowl game. This TCU team is led by Max Duggan, who has always had that special edge to him, but he hasn't become an elite quarterback. This year, he's become that elite quarterback. 1,900 yards, 16 touchdowns, just 1 interception, and his team is a top 10 team in the nation. And like I talked about before, the Horned Frogs college football playoffs? Maybe. 2
points, I'll give you 2 points. Last time we were on the juicer, Nick picked Spencer over me. Also, the last time these two teams primed to win 8 games this season. Last time TCU won 8 games, 2018. Last time that Tulane won 8 games, 2002. Golf wins, lowest score. Give me Tulane and Ian Nicholas to win the juicer. Handshake it out. And when we come back here on No Pulp, we're going to break down a lot of teams like Tulane, non-Power 5 teams that are ruining the Power 5 landscape. We'll get to that and a whole lot more when we return.
Did you know dragging chains can spark a wildfire?
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Did you hear about the pony with a sore throat? He was a little horse. Can I tell you a cat joke? Just kidding. Why couldn't the Wait, why was the basketball court all wet? Why? Because the players kept dribbling all over it. Where did cats go on vacation? New York.
One in 3 adults has prediabetes. That means it could be you, your favorite brother, your other brother, you, your football buddy, your football buddy, you, your plumber,
breathe right into your foot,
your plumber's masseuse,
yes,
you, your dog walker, your cat jogger. With early diagnosis, prediabetes can be reversed. Take the risk test at doihaveprediabetes.org.
Welcome back into No Pulp. Cameron Ezeir, Nick Zelaya. Last year, Cincinnati became the first non-Power 5 team to make the college football playoffs. Cam, this year, there's some teams in the non-Power 5 conferences making some serious noise.
Sun Belt, Fun Belt. We're going to start off with Georgia Southern. What a year it's been for Georgia Southern. Over the past 3 seasons, bottom 3 in the Sun Belt in total offense. This year, they got Kyle Van Trees, who's one of the best quarterbacks in the entire nation, second in the nation in total completions. He throws about 50 times per game, 17 touchdowns, one of 16 FBS quarterbacks to sport that mark. Also, second in the country in yards, 2,551. More importantly, they just came off a win against number 25 JMU, and they entered 0-2 in the Sun Belt.
They didn't just come off a big win. Van Trees 578 yards against Old Dominion. Let's talk a bit about Coastal Carolina now. This is another team. Georgia Southern and Coastal Carolina, you know, they're a bit even, but I think the Carolina team has the edge. And for one reason, they're starting quarterback, and that's Grayson McCall. He's had a great career at Coastal Carolina, but this season's been spectacular. 1,900 yards, 18 touchdowns, 1 interception. It seems like they've been in a lot of close games this year, but it shows that they can fight for 60 straight minutes and pull out some big victories. You see there, they lost this past week against Old Dominion, a game they were favored, but before that, they know how to score a lot of points. While the defense isn't the best, like I mentioned, a lot of close games, they're able to pull out victories, even if it's by 1 possession.
And Army, they're the complete opposite of Coastal Carolina, as well as Kyle Van Trees and Georgia Southern. Those boys like to run, they like to toss, and so does an American team. How about the team called Tulane? And I had to check my notes because they haven't been relevant since 2007 when Matt Forte, before he went to the Chicago Bears, had over 2,100 yards and 23 touchdowns. That's Heisman worthy if Tulane doesn't go 4-8. The Tulane Green Wave so far this season, they're primed to win 8 games. They already have 6 wins. They've won 3 straight games twice this season after only winning 2 games a year ago. And I mentioned they're primed to win 8 games. If you missed the last segment with Ian Nicholas, I said last time Tulane won 8 games back in 2002.
You mentioned Matt Forte. I actually have a cousin named Matt Forte, but he's a musician, not the football player. I wish though. One more team we want to talk a bit about, and that's UCF. This team's been in the spotlight, I mean, for the last decade. They went undefeated just a few years back. Conversations of them making the playoffs didn't happen.
National champions, maybe?
Last week, they scored 70 points against Temple. The thing with this team is they like to have quick drives. They score a lot of points. John Reese Plumlee, 18 completions for 373 yards. This is the 5th best offense in the country. They average 525 yards per game, 41 points per game. And I talked about Ohio State sharing the wealth with 5 different guys with 100 receiving yards. This team's got 6 guys with 100 plus receiving yards. Talk about sharing the wealth a little more.
And how about 3 receivers with over 300 receiving yards?
They had that loss to Louisville, a good ACC team, but I mean, they beat Georgia Tech 27-10. They can beat Power 5 teams, which is a big reason that UCF has always been good, and they'll always be like a solid team, a respectable team.
You just got to take down the self-proclaimed national champions, let's be honest.
Pretty much, yeah. We'll take one last break on No Pulp. When we come back, we'll show our plays of the week, which was nuts, by the way. Check these out. Also, Cam and I's final words. Don't go anywhere.
Taking care of a family member can lead to plenty of questions. Fortunately, there's a place to get the answers, for them and for you. Find articles, tips, and tools from experts and others who have been in your place. The Caregiving Resource Center at aarp.org/caregiving.
I see you mobbing over her. Let's go. Let's mob. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, we mobbing. Come on, girl. Let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl. Hey, let's crawl. Hey, yo, let's crawl.
Wrapping up No Pulp in the only way we know with Nick Zelaya, I'm Cameron Ezeir. A couple fireworks for you. Our plays of the week for a weekend that was unbelievable. Nick, I got to know your play of the week because you've been talking about it for a while.
Ooh, C.J. Colden for Oklahoma, and I'm a big defensive guy. I love when corners are athletic. They go up there and make a pick. What about this? Oh, one hand, and you know, usually you tip it with your one hand and then you catch it with your chest. No. Colden literally one hand and snagged it with another hand. If this is the NFL, he's getting up and running it back for a pick six. Shout out Oklahoma, though, for a big win over Kansas. I'm sorry, Jayhawk fans, but that was a pretty cool play.
I have to pick my jaw off the ground. Unbelievable, but shouts out to the fans. I think they made the most headlines this weekend. Tennessee, Rocky Toppy, how about it? They bring him out in Tennessee, and they brought him out in full force after beating Alabama 52-49. The fans just didn't rush the field. They took the goalpost, they took it out of the stadium.
This is wild.
And then they put it in a river.
This is wild.
The river's lifting for the first time since 1998. The fans removed the goalposts, and for the first time ever, hidden treasure could be in the Tennessee River.
Those things are heavy, too. Those are not light. Like, that was a whole team effort.
And if you want to donate to the cause and donate $150,000 for Tennessee to put in goalposts, or, you know, re-put in their goalposts.
They need them by Saturday.
Exactly.
So.
Come on. With an
Let's go. Chop, chop.
With an endowment of over $1 billion. Come on. Okay, now it's time for our game of the week.
It's time for the No Pulp Game of the Week.
Ooh, No Pulp Game of the Week time. UCLA, Oregon. Do they deserve to get game day? Well, I'm just shocked. If you told me at the beginning of the year that the best two teams in the Pac-12 would be two top 10 teams and they'd be Oregon and UCLA and not USC, I'd be shocked.
It's the first time since 2018 that two top 10 teams have faced off from the Pac-12 in a matchup. And for me, I'm a big guy about the Pac-12. You know this, Cam. I love my Pac-12 teams as an East Coast player. UCLA and Oregon, I think I have Oregon with the edge in this one. You know, Oregon obviously had that beat down against Georgia 49-3 in week 1, but they haven't lost since then. And they've looked pretty good. I have high hopes with Bo Nix. He's really picked it up. It feels like he's getting better every single week. Give me the Ducks.
Give me the Ducks as well. Bo Nix, what I love about him, he's only been sacked once. The defense is good, the offensive line is better, and Bo Nix still has great hair. Final thoughts, Nick?
You know, we're going to kick it to the Pac-12 because I just talked about it with the game. This Pac-12 is awesome. 4 teams in the top 15 right now in the Pac-12. You got Oregon, you've got UCLA, USC, who just got bounced, and Utah. But when it comes to the Pac-12, they haven't been relevant for a while. In fact, they've stunk in college football for a good amount of times the last couple of years. USC and UCLA, they're like, we're having enough with the Pac-12. We're going to the Big Ten. We're moving to play some noon games in some cold weathers. But these are a couple teams that if Oregon was good at week 1, they could have had a really good contest with Georgia. And the Pac-12, if they can figure things out, I would not be surprised if they have a team in the college football playoffs.
Nick, what I will say is you can tell me I told you so about the Pac-12. I'll tell you I told you so. You remember what I said about a month ago? Tennessee, they are legit. Stop overlooking them. I understand Georgia and Alabama will be your top 2 teams in the SEC, but I already mentioned his name. Hendon Hooker has those amount of touchdowns. Hey, I told you so. My hair might be longer. I might have a nicer suit right now, but I told you so. Hendon Hooker, he's a legit Heisman candidate. 15 touchdowns, just 1 interception. Tennessee scoring about 48 points per game. That's second in the nation in total offense. I mean, talk about Jalen Hyatt. He's having himself one heck of a year, coming off a 5-touchdown performance. Now, the only thing that I struggle with Tennessee is they have to face Georgia. But they lose to Georgia, they can still be a 1-loss SEC team going to the college football playoff. I told you so. Tennessee is now going to the college football playoff. How about that? We're hyping up Tennessee. We're hyping up the Pac-12. We're hyping up a lot of teams. We're going to catch you next week here on No Pulp for our executive producer, Ben Spector. He's Nick Zelaya. I'm Cameron Ezeir saying so long. And hey, if this last weekend said anything, get ready for a wacky weekend of college football.